In this video I'm going to provide a brief overview of The Merchant of Venice. I won't summarise every event, after all the play is over 17,000 words long, but I will focus on the main causal events that it'll be helpful to know more about. Now, as I mentioned in another video, Shakespeare's plays often begin with a sense of pre-existing discontent that motivates the characters. In this play there are two such issues. First, Antonio, the merchant of the play's title, is unhappy, but it's unclear why. In the opening scene, characters will speculate that he's worried about losing his investments. When he denies this, they think he might be in love. He also denies this. But as we'll see in the play, he does seem to love Bassanio, so this assertion may be nearer the truth. Bassanio, who is Antonio's young friend, also has a problem. He wants to marry a woman called Portia, but he lacks the money to compete with rivals for her hand in marriage. In Act 1, Bassanio asks Antonio for money, but the problem is that Antonio doesn't have any available. It's tied up in merchandise that's being shipped abroad. Nevertheless, Antonio is keen to help his friend, despite having already lent him money that Bassanio has spent. He sends Bassanio to the Venetian moneylenders and tells him to ask for a loan, saying that he'll pay it back when he has sold his merchandise abroad. The person to whom Bassanio goes for this money is Shylock, and this complicates matters because Antonio disapproves of usury, or the charging of interest on loans, and he's also insulted and spit on Shylock in public. Needless to say, Shylock hates Antonio, partly because of his behaviour towards him, and partly for lending money without charging interest, thus affecting Shylock's business, the only business Shylock is actually allowed to conduct. But we should note that Shylock offers the loan interest-free at first, and Antonio rejects this. He doesn't want to be seen as a friend of Shylock's, and it's only at this point that Shylock proposes the idea that Antonio will give him a pound of flesh if he fails to pay back the loan. Now, having got the loan, in Act 2, Bassanio makes plans to pursue his goal of marrying Portia. And Act 2 is also the period where the plot becomes more complicated. In The Merchant of Venice, one of these complications is the isolation and provocation of Shylock. First, his servant Lancelot leaves him to go and work for Bassanio. Shylock is then enraged to learn that his daughter Jessica has stolen his money and run away with a Christian, someone called Lorenzo. Now, it's important that we see this isolation and provocation, because it helps us to understand Shylock's hostile reaction in Acts 3 and 4. Now, as Act 3 begins, we approach the midpoint, and we know from an earlier video that normally one goal is achieved, but there's normally a major reversal of fortune. And this pattern holds in this play. Bassanio achieves his goal of marrying Portia, but we immediately learn that Antonio's ships have all been sunk, leaving him unable to pay Shylock the money he owes him. Here, the antagonist, Shylock, fights back and demands his pound of flesh, but now he's demanding the heart of him. This is the first time it's mentioned. So effectively this is a death sentence for Antonio. Now, this is typical of Act 3 in these plays, where the stakes are raised and the effects of actions taken in Acts 1 and 2 provoke a response from the person or people antagonised in the first half of the play. It's at this point that Portia decides to intervene to help Antonio by disguising herself as a lawyer, and in Act 4, Scene 1, the longest scene in the play, she judges whether Shylock should or should not have his pound of flesh. It's enough to say here that she resolves the situation. But the way she does is intriguing, and I'll deal with that in more detail in another video. Then finally, in Act 5, the final plot lines are resolved. In this case, it is the missing wedding ring. At the midpoint, Bassanio was given a wedding ring by Portia and told never to give it away. It turns out that he has given it away, and she wants to know where it is. This cross-examination is on one level a comic plot line, because we know as the members of the audience that Bassanio gave it to Portia when she was dressed as a man, and he gave it as a reward for saving Antonio. But it also highlights an important fault line in the story. Portia loves Bassanio, and he loves her. But there is a third person, Antonio. He also loves Bassanio. In fact, earlier in the play, one character suggests that Antonio only loves the world for him, i.e. Bassanio. So Antonio's continued presence can be seen as a threat to the relationship between Portia and Bassanio, and the way she resolves this final issue is a subject that I'll discuss in more depth in another video. Give a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and subscribe now so that you never miss any of my future posts.